Good morning, Indiana. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the Sunday morning news and talk show for the Hoosier State without all the bad faith BS, both sidesism, and mega gaslighting. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I am broadcasting this morning from the scenic Baymont Inn in Michigan City, Indiana, where I am visiting the weekend. Just a good friend of mine for 40 years get married last night. So good to see some folks I have not seen in a long time. And hey, it's good to see you this morning here, Indiana. Thank you for joining me. Before we begin, a little housekeeping. I do want to make sure you're following us here on Project Next. If you're on YouTube, be sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit that bell icon, get notifications whenever we post new content. Follow Project Next Media on all the socials at Project Next Movement on most of them, on Project Next Media on a couple of the other ones. And if for some reason you venture into the cesspool that is Elon Musk's X platform, we are at Project Next 25 there. As for me, Scott here is online at whosleft.us. That's my handle on most of the social media sites. Drop the US, and that's my handle on most of the other ones. All right, enough of the shameless self promotion. Let us welcome in our panel this morning. Just two folks to join me. First, the voice of the youth, Zach Harrison. Zach, welcome.
Hello, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you this morning. First timer. Welcome to the panel. Always like to introduce new people to our viewers. Why don't you tell the folks about yourself just briefly, real quick?
Certainly. So I am with the Indiana Roll Summit cohort. Some of you who were tuning in to Scott recently may have seen Michelle on here, who is the founder of the Indiana Roll Summit. We are talking to roll folks across the state. We are engaging a new kind of vision for leadership and rank and file at the State House, whether it be the State House or State Senate. We are now supporting local candidates in rural counties in different parts of the state as well. And I am also working on the Interns Initiative as Deputy of Youth Engagement for Rural Summit and Michelle Higgs' campaign to have younger voices be part of the discussion and feel like their voice doesn't just matter, but that we need them in this fight with us, and that multi-generational support in protesting and getting out the vote and having new ideas heard and bringing people together is the way it's got to be done. So I am hopeful. We have seen recently colleges interested in broadcasting those opportunities that we are working on to the undergraduate populations. And so looking forward to continuing that fight and bringing more younger people into the conversation.
Well, fantastic. Thank you for your work, and welcome to the show. Good to have you for the first time. And on the opposite end of that spectrum, longtime friend of the show, our old buddy, our old pal, Jesse Brown, Indianapolis City County Council District 13. Welcome, Jesse.
Thanks, Scott. Awesome to be here. Great to meet you, Zach. Yeah, I'm really excited for the show today.
And I bet most of the people watching know you at home, but hey, for those first timers, why don't you introduce yourself?
Absolutely, sure. So I am Indianapolis's, I believe, first ever socialist elected to City County Council. Won the Democratic primary in 2023 against the council vice president at the time with $0 raised from any organization campaign. It was just a whole bunch of grassroots knocking on doors, and volunteers propelled me into office. And so I'm a proud Democratic Socialists of America member and spend my days fighting every single level of government, it feels like, and occasionally, sometimes winning.
Love to have you in that fight. I'm proud to know you and have you working, for the people and, against party leadership when necessary. And I value that kind of independence, whether, not everybody does. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let us go ahead and jump in this week, starting here in the state of Indiana with a quick trip around the headlines in a segment I like to call Around the Corn. So let me begin up here in Michigan City, where Randy Novak, former chief of the city's fire department and president of the LaPorte County Council, was sworn in on Wednesday as the state representative for Indiana House District 9, filling the seat previously held by retiring Representative Pat Boyd. Also this week, The state submitted a request to the U.S. Department of Education for a waiver to combine multiple federal K-12 funding streams into a single block grant. Down in Terre Haute, this Indiana-Illinois Boundary Adjustment Commission convened for the first time to entertain proposals for the state of Indiana absorbing Illinois counties that have voted to secede from their state. Meanwhile, in Indianapolis, and maybe Jesse can speak to this, 23 of the 25 city county councilors sent a letter to the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission criticizing a proposed settlement with AES Indiana. That's the local public utility. The deal could raise residential electric bills by between $10 and $21 a month. The council called it far too generous to the company. Additionally, this week in redistricting news, this saga continues. The Indiana Black Legislative Caucus on Monday publicly condemned a push by state Republicans to undertake mid-decade redistricting. Former Republican Governor Mitch Daniels urged the Hoosier GOP not to cave to Trump in an op-ed in the Washington Post. State Senate Republicans do not have the votes as of Thursday this week, as reported by multiple Indianapolis news outlets. Yet, a new report last night from the Indianapolis Business Journal indicates that Governor Mike Braun could call a special session of the state legislature to redraw our congressional maps as soon as Monday. And finally, in the quick headlines this week, a couple favorites of the show were in the Hoosier State last night, where the largest crowd to gather for a sit-down banquet in the Terre Haute Convention Center history crowded into their ballroom to hear U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont speak about labor visionary Hoosier hero Eugene V. Debs. Sanders was honored with the Debs Foundation Award for his lifelong contribution to the struggle for social justice, and the senator was introduced by a surprise guest, New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who observed, quote, Bernie carried the light of Debs and class struggle to Vermont and the rest of the country. In his 45-minute remarks, Sanders quoted Debs frequently and noted how relevant and right and perceptive his words are more than a century after he spoke them, adding, quote, he not only educated people on the nature of American capitalism, but presented an alternative vision to greed and exploitation, and concluded with, our job is to take his message forward. Thank you. I'll be here all week. Let's jump in there. Both of you guys were in Terre Haute last night to see the senator. Impressions, Jesse.
Yeah, I mean, Bernie Sanders has long been a huge political hero of mine. Eugene Victor Debs has long been a personal political hero of mine. This is, I think, the fourth or fifth time I've gone to the Debs dinner. But yeah, as you mentioned, this was by far the biggest crowd ever. I knew dozens of people who wanted a seat who couldn't get one because it was sold out. So energy was electric. Call me a softie, but I was brought to tears multiple times through, besides the two people you mentioned, also Sarah Nelson, who's a super badass leader of the AFA, the Flight Attendants Union, led us in singing Solidarity Forever. So I don't know, just hold my hands.
I'm over here drinking the evil Starbucks cup while we're talking about like union organizing. Just do not. I'm going to go hide my head in shame after this show.
They're not on strike yet. You can go sign the no contract, no coffee pledge today. Yep. Please do. But
they're right across the parking lot. I'm sorry. My mea culpa's all around. Zach, how about you? Impressions of last night?
My first Eugene Debs dinner, we had the Indiana Roll Summit table where we had leaders from our cohort from different parts of the northern and southern region. And yeah, Jesse said it was electric. We also knew many people who wanted to be there who could not, especially of how quickly it sold out. I think within the first 72 hours. And we certainly felt the burn. On a personal note, with getting younger people out, AOC really is the passing of the torch to that next generation in that same democratic socialist brand. She has inspired millions of young people to really speak out. She has increased dialogue between younger people of different political ideologies and encouraged them to learn more, speak out, speak up, get engaged, and on their tour across the oligarchy tour across the country, and on this stop, both Bernie and AOC really encapsulated the vision of what Eugene Debs, as Bernie put it, a century ago. Now we are walking that path together.
You mentioned AOC. Talk about the next generation of Democratic leadership nationwide, and in our state, there is a certain hopeful of the younger generation who maybe intends to be the leader of the next Democratic generation in Indiana, and that is Bo Bai, the son and grandson of United States senators, who recently officially announced his campaign for Indiana Secretary of State. Now, from this Monday's Indianapolis Star, we got this article kind of questioning the launch strategy of the Bai campaign, titled "How Much Time Has Secretary of State Candidate Bo Bai Spent in Indiana?" Now, Bo Bai says he didn't mean to convey anything in particular with his choice of inviting Indy star's James Briggs to his empty condo in Indianapolis for his Secretary of State campaign announcement. "I just sort of took the interview from where I was in my life. I'm moving," he said in a phone interview more than a week after he announced he was running. "I wasn't really thinking of what could be drawn from that, I guess," Bai said. And I'm reading from the Indy Star article now. Much was drawn from it, though, in fact, as Republican critics, and I may add, critics from the Democratic left, also hopped on the detail as illustrative of the perception that Bai, a Democrat, has barely lived in Indiana, even while he touts as part of his campaign pitch that he is a seventh-generation Hoosier. Now, University of Indianapolis political science professor Greg Shuffelt is skeptical that this line of attack about the residency is really going to matter. In 2016, when Evan Bai, Bo's father, last ran for U.S. Senate against Todd Young, it wasn't really a factor in that election so much as that Trump's coattails were a factor. The professor says, quote, "The fact that Evan Bai had a D in front of his name mattered a whole lot more than what his address might have said." Now, in Bo Bai's case, based on the numbers he faces in Indiana, if he is the Democratic nominee, he would need to win over Republicans whose partisanship would otherwise lend themselves to vote for Morales. So while announcing from an empty apartment might have been an unforced error, there probably is not a large bucket of fence sitters who would consider voting for Bai, but for whom this would be a deal breaker. Again, that's Scherfelt, the professor at University of Indianapolis. So let me ask, Zach, is this a what you would call a self-inflicted error, an unforced error? Is this bad optics? Is this bad strategy? What do you see here from the younger Bai?
Well, certainly there is a long history of residency being a attempted wedge at whether it's local races or even national races when touting accomplishments from past jobs in politics at the state or local level before running federal. In Bo's case, I would agree with the professor that I don't think it's going to be that big of an impact. I think perhaps it was an unforced error. Or as some people like to call in the post-Biden era, a gaffe. Anything remotely that looks that way. But I would also say, as reflecting a new generation, that I have not seen much evidence of that from Bo yet. I've yet to really see the fullness of his platform, so don't want to jump too far ahead of the bandwagon. But one of the biggest things that I'm looking at, the Rural Summit is looking at, and other groups as well, is that younger rural Hoosiers do not feel like they're being talked to, they're being talked at, and they are being left behind and left out of conversation, and that the key issues that they would note are not anywhere in the talking points of the state parties or the people in the state house. So we will have to see if Bo is able to actually tap into that or not.
Jesse, if you wanted to make your candidate look like an elite, out of touch carpetbagger, you would do exactly what this campaign is doing now, right? I mean, listen, whatever his platform is, however lovely a guy is, however lovely his family is, it's just terrible optics, no?
That's how it reads to me. I've never met Bo. I've heard he's a nice guy from people who have met him. Nothing I say about him is intended as criticism of him as a person. But I think, like, if you look at the story of Indiana, especially since 2008, you see a people who are hungry for political revolution. We went for Obama, even though we're a deep red state, because he ran on hope and change. People are really fed up with how things are working in this state, despite the fact that Republicans seem to win time after time, because we don't see viable candidates running against them that the party acts like matter, right? And so we just don't see anybody for regular working class people against the oligarchs or the political dynasties in charge. And again, I'm not saying Bo could be a super progressive guy with great personal ideas, but when you show up, no one's seen you in decades, if they've ever even seen the baby pictures of you that used to be in the papers. You show up with this like awesome credentials, Harvard, you've got military, you've got a clerkship, things that don't matter at all to regular people, in my experience. And then suddenly you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations from out of state and in state. But just, it's like, where was all this money when we had candidates running last year trying desperately to beat the supermajority? For some reason, that just didn't, come until, where's this money for Blythe Potter, who I think, is a strong candidate. You don't have to love Blythe, but when you get this much money this early in the race, and when you just seem so carpetbagged and just like plopped down to win a race, it seems like it's designed to push out progressive party insiders rather than start appealing to general people. Secretary of State race, I mean, up until next summer, the only people whose votes matter are going to be state party delegates, which means you're not applying across the aisle. You're not trying to reach moderates or conservatives. You're trying to reach Democratic insiders, and dropping this much money so early is just a let's get Blythe out of here rather than a let's actually bring people into the political process. And I think it's just the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. I haven't met, maybe I'd prefer Bo over Blythe. I really doubt that, but there's a possibility. But just the fact that as somebody who is technically an insider because I'm an elected official, I'm an elected precinct committee person, I'm a 2-time state party delegate, nobody has reached out to me to talk about Bo. Instead, they've just dumped a bunch of money in his campaign account and expected I could just follow the trend here. So I really kind of resent that personally.
And ads.
Oh, sorry.
The ads. The interview, empty apartment, the aw shucks affect, the brand new fresh Colts threads and Pacers hats, and it just comes off like, how do you do, fellow Hoosiers? Like, it is not, it's inauthentic. And you got it, this, Jesse. You talk about the hunger for a political revolution, just the desire to do something different. And the people demand authenticity, say the weird thing. You've all seen the TikTok video. I don't know if you're going to get political revolution or even the hinting at political revolution from a dude named Birch Evans by the Fourth. It's not relatable. Yeah. But yeah, but you can call me handsome in French.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's, again, he could be the nicest guy in the world. Maybe he's the best, strongest candidate. But I really think if Democrats want to win in this state, we have to embrace conflict and intra-party discussion and debate. And, I'm hearing that already party insiders are calling Blythe, trying to tell her to drop out, trying to, encourage stopping any chance of a contested convention. And as a person who, gave the nominating speech for Cliff Marsiglio, a very long shot LG candidate last year. I think a contested convention is exactly what we do need. We need people fired up and feeling like their opinions matter, not just the convention as a coronation ceremony. So, yeah, obviously strong feelings about this. I know we got to move on.
100%. Zach, final thought on this topic.
Yeah, I would add that although I said that residency might not be a big issue, funding from out of state before the thing has even really started, that is a huge red flag for Hoosiers that we talk to, and I'm sure Jesse talks to across the state. And Blythe, knowing her not just as a candidacy, but as a friend, she has been called to drop out, but she is doing the real work. She has gone to all corners of this state. She is not just talking with local Democratic leaders, but the communities that they represent. She's asking what are the key concerns. She's asking as Secretary of State what they would like to see changed and what support the local municipalities to make elections run smoother and a more transparent process for all Hoosiers. She is bright. She has represented the Democrats in Chicago as a delegate at the Democratic National Convention. She is very much trying to bring transparency also into just the overall process of what's happening at the State House. She is very active on social media, and I believe she has a unique perspective and opportunity to bring those people along and make sure they're not just part of the discussion, but they understand what's happening and not allow the parties or the supermajority to pull the theoretical wool over their eyes.
Yes. All right. Let's move on and talk about what's going on down in my new hometown, my chosen city of residence, Bloomington, where on Tuesday, right-wing pundit Tucker Carlson headlined a Turning Point USA rally on Bloomington's IU campus, covering for the late Charlie Kirk, who has been rendered unavailable to helm his campus tour this year. So Governor Mike Braun played fluffer for the conspiracy theorist and misinformation super spreader after earlier that day signing a proclamation declaring October 1st Turning Point USA Civic Engagement Day across the state. Wearing his trademark all-blue working man cosplay outfit, Braun warmed up the Timu Hitler Youth Rally by urging young people to embrace values of faith, family, and community. Values, he said, Kirk was never afraid to champion. Now, Braun encouraged the student-heavy crowd to go into the lion's den of campus and, quote, be the foot soldiers for Kirk's Christian nationalist values and grow it into the place where this is more common on universities than the other stuff you often see in universities. And, quote, other stuff like woke liberal diversity and curiosity and empathy. All of which Braun is using state power to stifle at our once great state institutions of higher learning. Now, Carlson, at the top of the bill, covered a broad range of topics, including abortion, Israel, and illegal aliens, both earthly and extraterrestrial, and made claims sounding a whole lot like the white nationalist great replacement theory, as he is prone to do. Now, in typical contrarian Carlson fashion, the mound of bullshit was accompanied by glimmers of truth and moments of almost getting it. For example, and here I'm reading from the Indy Star write-up of the event, in response to a question about what woke means, Carlson agreed on the importance of having a definition before describing wokeness as an attempt by the powerful to make the less powerful shut up. No. The attendee then moved to the topic of how billionaires can influence elections, which Carlson agreed with. He didn't align himself with a specific political party either. Okay, see, here's Carlson, contrarian, hinting at truth a little bit. I kind of hate the Republican Party, he said, adding that Democrats, however, are evil. And as an aside, I think it's funny here because, I think both of us, in our ways, would describe the way we feel about the Democratic Party in the same way. It's like, yes, I hate the Democratic Party, but no, the Republicans are evil. Irony. One attendee asked Carlson if he ever felt trapped in the system of mainstream media and the outrage machine, as it were. And Carlson replied that he did sometimes feel held captive by the channels he worked at before acknowledging, and this is my favorite quote of the whole article. He says, "It's totally possible that I'm working toward evil and don't know it, but I don't believe that. I actually think I'm doing the right thing." So
So close.
Jesse, so
Yet
close.
so far.
Thoughts?
Yeah, just like all of this, I try to find the grain of truth, and I think there are people who are, snowed by or had the wool pulled over their eyes by this kind of like faux populism on the right. And I think good people can get tricked by this. And so I'm not trying to talk down to people who are necessarily fans, but I think you just need to follow the money, right? And look, and this is an astroturfed organization that is just billionaires trying to push policy ideas and the underlying substructure of values that will let them keep getting richer and keep robbing you, right? So, is free debate a good thing in a free society? 100%. Like, I always want to hear from people who disagree with me, even if they're crazy far right people who I totally disagree with. I want to hear, and figure out, like Carlson said, maybe I am wrong, right? And I want to get lots of exposure to other ideas to make sure of that. But that's not what this is, right? This is the same party. I don't care if he says, he kind of hates the Republican Party. That's the party he's propping up. And they're the people who are taking books out of libraries. They're the people who are like opposed to the word diversity. They don't want conflicting ideas. They don't want conflicting backgrounds. They don't want challenges. Like, who can go report at the Pentagon right now, right? Like, it's gaslighting to pretend like this party cares about free speech or freedom of information. It's absolutely becoming a totalitarian state, and pretending you have to like hound the last remaining bastions of, even if it's annoying, cultural, like identity politics stuff that is not my cup of tea. Like, how is that causing a problem for you right now compared to the government overreach you see, compared to the just absolute clampdown on free speech and free debate? The fact that they're aimed the way they are reveals the whole game, which is not anything about freedom, and it's everything about getting rid of your opponents. So, foot soldiers, I think, is right. Stormtroopers might be another word of what they're trying to look to create. And yeah, I feel bad for people who this is the only whiff of populism they've ever been exposed to, because I think compared to the stale and stagnant political structure, it might look appealing. But I just encourage people, dig deeper, follow the money. It's all bullshit. And I think it's pretty easy to tell that once you start scratching around.
Zach, if I recall, after Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk's unfortunate assassination, what is it, month plus? I don't think it's been quite 2 months yet, but it's been several weeks ago now. In the wake of that, there was this crackdown on political speech from the right, talking about how now is not the right time. We got to respect this legacy. We need to turn down the temperature. Got to quit calling people fascists, even when they do fascist stuff. What do you think about our governor, Mr. Braun, in the wake of that? After all this talk about turning down the temperature, going on to my alma mater and your current place of education's campus, talking about young conservatives being foot soldiers on campus. Doesn't sound great. Not great, Bob. Not great, Bob.
Yeah, I want to first encapsulate that the university at IU Bloomington is not the one that I grew up in anymore, unfortunately. We have seen an erosion of norms and expectations and bylaws that the current president and the board of trustees renewed and agreed to be bound by them, and they have broken them over and over again. What am I talking about? I'm talking about administrators being relieved midterm without talking to the dean of said department. I am talking about CEA 20 complaints where professors are ejected or suspended without due process or involving of the AAUP that represents professors in these situations and are left completely out of the loop. And how was Pamela Whitten installed in the first place? By bypassing the entire infrastructure of people that are supposed to be involved in such an important decision that impacts not just the university, not just the county, but all of the other universities and counties around it, as IU Bloomington sets the mark and flame for all the other branches. We are now ranked as one of the worst universities in the country for free speech. And recently, there was the suspension of IDS very temporarily. And thankfully, Purdue was not having that. Some of their people lobbied and got the press release out and shared and sent some of them to IU students so that they would not miss the article. But it's just the latest in a long scheme. To Tucker Carlson and Mike Braun, it is despicable to see the talking of honoring someone while asking for essentially open warfare of words and foot soldiers, as they put it, in the streets. Many people remember, as it was national headline news not all that long ago, when there were snipers on the IMU when students were trying to peacefully protest and the guard were brought in. I will say that I believe Mayor Thompson did the only thing she could do in that situation and stopped Bloomington PD from being involved. But overall, we see a propaganda machine that is asking young people to essentially take up arms on the streets of IU and change the status quo to what they like it to be, not what academic freedom and the long history of IU states it should be for all students that come from all over the place.
It's certainly very, very concerning to see such things at a place I love. And just the IU's reputation. We're becoming an SEC school in football and in academics, and I don't know if I like that trade-off. In fact, I'm pretty sure I do not. Let's move on and talk about Wednesday's story here this week. So, on Wednesday, we learned that the organizers of the famous Irvington Halloween Festival have voted, or had voted the previous evening to conjure their best Kamala Harris impression and tell Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett, do not come. So the Irvington Community Council voted on an October 21st meeting to send a letter to Hogsett asking him not to come to the highly attended festival in light of recent critical media coverage of his administration. In response, this is a quote from the letter, in response to a formal request from neighbors and out of the respect for survivors of sexual assault and others affected, the historic Irvington Community Council has voted to formally ask that you refrain from attending any event associated with the 79th Historic Irvington Halloween Festival. End quote. That's what the letter reads in part. And this comes as the steady drip of reporting on the toxic culture of sexual harassment, abuse of power, and self-dealing in the Hogsett administration continues unrelentingly. Recall, and WFYI did a very good job of summarizing this in an interview earlier this week with Abrianna Heron. So I'm going to pull a couple quotes out of that article to help us reset the table here. So last year, several women came forward to describe accusations of sexual harassment and abuse of power against Thomas Cook. This is Mayor Joe Hogsett's chief of staff from his first term in office to around 2015, from his first term of office in around 2015 until the end of 2020 when he left city government. That was the first time that those allegations were out in the public. In the course of that reporting, we learned about Cook's actions after he left city government and began working for this law firm in the private sector, and that's when we began to hear from sources about this relationship Cook had that had led to him being asked to resign from city government. It was a prohibited relationship with a subordinate. Her name was Scarlett Andrews, and after Cook left city government and became a partner at this law firm, he starts signing up big-name developers who are seeking taxpayer incentives for development projects, and meanwhile, the person that Cook had a relationship that led to him resigning was Andrews, who was working in the Department of Metropolitan Development, the agency charged with awarding those incentives at the time. You see what's going on here. Big sloppy conflict of interest. And so after he leaves city government, She gets promoted to lead that department, and pretty quickly, starting in 2021 and going through the end of 2023, you have a situation where Thomas Cook is on one side of the negotiating table representing developers, and you have Andrews representing the city on the other side of the table. And all of this is looming over, everything Hogsett's doing. And then later this week, we get a follow-up from law firm Fisher Phillips, the folks who conducted a nearly $500,000 investigation from the city. Months after this investigation left lingering questions about Hogsett's response to the complaints, the City County Council received this follow-up document, emailed to the councilors on Wednesday night, shedding info on why these investigators didn't subpoena Cook in their investigation. And so, we went through the details, but in response to the question about why the firm sought access they were unable to obtain, the authors wrote they chose not to subpoena Cook because it would have resulted in unnecessary costs and expenses. Now, make sure I'm plugged in over here. This thing's saying my computer's gonna die in a second. That's not good. I'm gonna go do that. I'm gonna disappear from the screen for a second while Jesse tells us whether that excuse was sufficient. Jesse, this is right in your wheelhouse. You are one of those counselors to whom Fisher Phillips was writing this report. Why? How could they not subpoena the primary person involved in this investigation?
Well, this wasn't what I wanted when I voted for this investigative committee, but I think it is what, for example, Council President Bob Osley wanted, which was to pass the buck, to spend a whole lot of time pretending to investigate, to make sure to limit the scope of that investigation to mostly HR-related things, which is what they tried to do before counselors pushed back and tried to push for an investigative committee. You'll notice in the same report, which I actually got just like hours before the media got it. I had not seen this prior, so it wasn't like it was briefed, to me by council staff. You'll notice multiple times in what was reported in the media, our council attorney spoke with Fisher Phillips to outline the scope of the investigation. Our council attorney didn't believe that we actually had the authority to be doing what we wanted to do, and told Fisher Phillips basically not to do what we counselors had wanted them to do. There's also several conversations mentioned between our council attorney and Fisher Phillips that weren't released to us counselors, citing attorney-client privilege. What? That's our attorney. We are the client. We should have the privilege to see those conversations. So I don't understand that at all. To me, it still stinks like a cover-up from the council trying to protect Joe Hogsett. But as a broader picture of what's going on, it's been incredibly clear. Like, Joe Hogsett has excused what he knew was unconsensual sex. The word I grew up knowing for that is rape. He knew that Thomas Cook had had unconsensual sex with somebody after he had had this other experience, and he didn't see fit to do anything about it. He didn't even put it in Thomas Cook's HR file. He just had a personal note on his desk warning, don't let Thomas Cook sleep with other subordinates. It's totally inexcusable. It's a person of very low moral character, which we knew before. We also knew that there was absolute conflict of interest going on with taxpayer money. So I think it's beyond time this guy leaves. I wanted to loop back around to the Halloween festival thing and just point something out. I will say, when I called for Joe Hogsett to resign, I was the first person in the state to do it after the first Indy Star article dropped. I had not heard a ton of complaints from my constituents. It just seemed so incredibly clear that I had to take a moral, personal choice. Every other counselor who has called for him to resign, and I'm assuming the IBJ editorial staff who called for him to resign, only did so after tons of people quietly told them, gosh, I hate this guy. I really want him out. Can you use your position to call for this, right? So they're using counselors as a shield, but this isn't individual counselors calling for him to resign. This is huge groups of constituents or businesses in the IBJ's case who want this guy out of there and don't think it's appropriate he stays in. So that, if you cited an important part of the Irvington Community Council letter, but there's another part of the letter where they say they privately told Joe Hogsett, hey, we don't want you there. Can you just not come? And he refused to commit to not coming. That's the only reason that they intentionally leaked this letter, to make it go public. because they're like, what do we have to do? I think about it like, let's say, totally just out of hypothetical, right? Let's say you have an alcoholic family member who shows up at family gatherings and ruins them every time. If you quietly ask that person not to come to Thanksgiving this year because of what happened last year, and he's like, I don't know, might show up, might not. You have to escalate, right? You can't just like wait and see what happens and have everybody dread and have their family event ruined, right? This guy should be absolutely embarrassed, especially if he gives two shits about the Democratic Party and our chances in Indiana. There are so many people who correctly call out the corruption happening in Hogsett's administration and say, see, the Democrats are no better than the Republicans, and that's why I'm just not going to vote at all. Going back to the Bo-Bai thing, what we need is not to pull Republican voters over. We need to pull the massive numbers of adults who aren't registered or the massive number of registered voters who don't show up to the polls. We have to give them something to fight for, and we are tainting our brand irreparably by allowing absolute crooks and sex pests like this to remain in office. I'll pause and let Zach or you respond. Sorry.
Yeah, Zach, please do.
I first freely admit I am not as in the known as Councilmember Jesse Brown here, but it is certainly a sad state of affairs when you have not only someone in this position of such low moral character, but a matter of the constituency and the members Jesse just articulated with the Thanksgiving example. What exactly has to be done to showcase that you are not wanted here and that you are not representing the people here authentically? And if you believed in that, you would welcome an open investigation and you would welcome an independent committee to oversee that thing and then direct all questions until that is resolved to said committee. And we have seen this song and dance, of course, not just in Indiana, not just in federal government, but in states across the nation, particularly in a post 9/11 world or in a post-Trump world. I mean, we have seen these same talking points. It's like a mirror being put up on reflex, and the idea that there is no accountability that will bring me down.
Zach, let me ask you, because Jesse mentioned this. He's talking about folks like Hogsett tainting the Democratic brand. I mean, listen, this is the mayor of the largest media market in the state. If people are turning on the 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock news and they see a Democrat on their TV, it's probably Joe Hogsett. Do you find the folks in rural organizing spaces, nowhere near Indianapolis, but still, within the broadcast range, does that perception that your city machine Democrats have, affect our perception out in rural Indiana?
Absolutely, it does. I will first frankly say that I don't think that Hogsett is at the top of many rural Democrat or Republicans' minds when we are talking to them. He's probably very low on their list of priorities in most cases. But generally speaking, certainly there is a perception of Indianapolis or of Marion County. I mean, in the proposed redistricting, one of the things that Republicans that we have talked to, or during the No Kings protest, Republicans that are against Trump and came out but still support a lot of state Republicans, is this idea that one of the proposed showed map that's gone around is going to split Marion County more and push it into congressional districts that are mostly rural or artificially rural, and that they are disgusted by the very idea of sharing that thing because of the overall reputation of Marion or Indianapolis for many of these rural communities. They feel it's out of touch. They feel that the concerns of Indianapolis as a dome, of which they are left out of the supposed Silver City in any individual state. But in this case with Hogsett or any of the leading officials in the not just largest media market, but most populous city and seat of the state, we would hope that finally there would be some level of accountability and reaching out to the larger constituency of the state. And the few House or Senate Democrats that are doing that are drowned out by that media market over and over again. So the perception in a nutshell, for many of these rural Hoosiers is that they don't care about us. So why should we even tune in to watch?
Yeah. So in summary, Joe, resign. You're killing us all. It's not just Indianapolis. You're hurting the whole state. You're hurting every Democrat in Indiana. And if you want to help, and if you want to, help your bestie Evan By and his son, don't be hanging around. They probably don't want smart people would not want your stink on them. Let's move on. And Zach, we're gonna talk about a rural issue here, because Indiana cattlemen have beef with the president. Farmers in the state and across the country, frankly, are uneasy over President Trump's comments to import beef from Argentina. Here, I'm quoting from an article on Wish 8 the other day. So now, Trump said he's concerned about consumer beef prices, which are high, and Argentinian beef could help. But Indiana Beef Cattle Association members are pushing back. They say more imports of Argentinian beef could make it harder for American farmers to make a living. Brian Shooter, executive vice president of the Indiana Beef Cattle Association, called it simple supply and demand. Add more meat to the supply, and cattle farmers can't sell at competitive rates. It will undercut them. He said Trump's comment has caused futures prices for cattle to fluctuate already. Quote, that just shows his comments like this may have an undue effect on our industry, end quote. So instead of relying on Argentinian beef, Shooter prefers to have the market work itself out, saying some of these comments tend to have negative effects on the business. Today's Indiana cattleman supports free and fair trade. Let the market work the way it should. Only 2% of U.S. beef currently comes from Argentina. A new deal could quadruple their import. Shooter says there's already a trade imbalance, with the U.S. importing $800 million worth of beef from Argentina, but Argentina only buying $7 million worth of American beef. Shooter concludes with the following quote. Well, never mind. That's not important. So let's go there. Beef. It's what's for dinner. Except not as often these days, because it is all-time high price. Zach, how do you feel about Argentinian beef?
Well, I think it certainly is a microcosm of the larger trade wars that is being waged around the globe at this point. And certainly there are op-eds or Chronicles or Washington Post talking about Republicans that are privately begging Trump to change tack with China and Canada in particular, and with beef specifically. I mean, our farmers are getting eviscerated by these trade deals and the government shutdown and the federal farm bill expiring when the shutdown began. After so many years of it being an essential support funding for median farms, not just in Indiana, but in many rural communities in 6 different states. And it doesn't exactly sound like, 7 million versus 800 to be just simple mathematics. It's not really a win for Americans as a whole that like beef, but certainly not for our American farmers, not to mention beef tallow being a favorite talking point of our esteemed RFK Jr. That believes that it is healthier and that it is a more healthy byproduct for Americans to consume on a regular basis.
Yeah, interesting. Jesse, now listen, I as a good socialist, whenever I hear talk of the free markets, it perks my ears up, because especially when it's coming from business, and especially from agribusiness, like the Beef Cattle Association here. Now, Mr. Shooter, great name. wants the free market to work the way it should. Now, isn't the agricultural industry at large, certainly, but beef and dairy are heavily subsidized by the federal government. I don't think they want the free market to work the way it should. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Scott, the way we hear free market in this country just means government subsidizes things that we never have to think about, right? Just like how people will complain about public housing, but don't think about the fact that the 30-year secured mortgage is absolutely an artifact of federal government intervention, right? So, we're in topsy-turvy land where these words don't mean anything. But I think it's more important to call out the fact that this is Trump being corrupt as usual and just trying to make sure his friends profit. And he wanted, American cattle people to be on his side to win elections because votes matter. But now that more and more, it's looking like we might not have more elections, or at least Trump is pushing us in that direction. Money is a lot more important to him than votes. And so having allies like the crazy chainsaw man in Argentina be propped up and have their governments be able to support him matters more than, farmers. And so I don't even think that the cost of beef for regular people is in the top 3 reasons Trump is doing this. I think he's finding ways to put money in the hands of people who support him because he knows they're going to turn around and do things like buy him a Qatari jet or, any other self-enrichment schemes that he could do. I saw a study that showed the tariffs in the 2016 term had so many exceptions, and almost every exception to the tariff was made for people who were campaign contributors or personal business associates of Trump. So it's a kleptocracy. He's just, mafioso style, just making deals to make sure his friends keep that sucking sound is money from our wallets going into theirs, right? So if anecdotally or tangentially to his main goals, that also lowers the price of beef, cool, whatever. He'll probably make some sound bites about it. But, if he cared about like what matters to the American people, I don't think he'd be building a $300 million ballroom while cutting SNAP benefits, right? I just think that he just obviously has disdain for regular folks.
Yeah, and listen, we want Americans' grocery bills to come down, or at least to quit growing faster than the general rate of inflation, right? But I'm going to have a little bit of a spicy hot take here right now, and I beef should be expensive. I don't know if we should be intervening in the market to work on lowering the price of beef. And this is not me being some vegan hippie or anything. Like, I love a cheeseburger. I eat entirely too many of them. Maybe if it was more expensive, I wouldn't eat as many of them. Like, price you out, get like the way they get you to quit smoking by raising cigarette taxes. Just quit eating all the cheeseburgers, Scott. We're going to keep raising the prices. But seriously, listen, beef is a very resource-intensive industry. For the protein calories you get out of a serving of beef, all the water and the feed and everything else that had to go into produce of is just massive. It's terrible for the environment. We probably should be eating less of it as a society and less of it as a world, and growing, more sustainable protein sources like soy and others. So again, maybe not my most popular take, but I don't know if of all the things on our plates, we should be worried about whether the price of beef is that one. Let's move on to our final Indiana story this week, and this one is unpleasant. So, trigger warning going in. Now, on Friday, we learned of the arrest of one Jonathan Wesley Peternell, age 24, of Pendleton, who was arrested on Thursday following investigation by the Hamilton County Metro Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Investigators said they received a cyber tip from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children indicating that Peternell had uploaded child sexual abuse material to Snapchat. Detectives seized from multiple laptops, iPads, tablets, cell phones, and storage devices from the home for forensic processing. In reviewing the data, investigators reported finding more than 200 files of suspected child sexual abuse material, including what they described as, quote, sadomasochistic child abuse, and photorealistic AI-generated photos of nude pregnant toddlers. End quote. There's a phrase I didn't ever want to say. The affidavit also states that more than 50 photos and videos were located on Peternell's phone that appeared to show his parents nude or engaged in sex acts. According to documents and a police release, investigators also discovered chat logs suggesting Peternell was distributing explicit material in a Snapchat group called Diddy Disciples, a reference to rapper Sean Diddy Combs, who was recently convicted of sex crimes of his own. So, listen, that's messed up. That's gross. But why are we talking about it? Well, Peternell is the son of Nathan Peternell, the lead pastor for all Life Church campuses, who hired Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith years ago to lead the church's Noblesville campus, where Beckwith continues to serve as pastor while holding elected office. The elder Peternell also regularly attends special events held at Life Church's Noblesville campus, where Beckwith leads the congregation and could be seen during a screening of conservative Christian documentary on Title IX. Nathan Peternell also co-hosts the conservative Christian podcast Jesus, Sex, and Politics with Beckwith. The two have long described their work as an intersection of faith and governance, often using the podcast to discuss religion's role in public policy and elections. Jesse, the call's always coming from inside the house, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, and speaking of which, I mean, this morning alone, two different people with close ties to the Beckwith clique, I guess, that's in charge of the LG's office, have told me this is the tip of the iceberg for this story. There's going to be more coming out, and it's going to be more obvious that Beckwith himself is personally implicated in some of this stuff, which, that's hearsay. Believe it if you want, but the people who reached out to me have not shared that didn't prove true. And I think that we can look at the AI porn of the legislator's wife from Beckwith's office that he supposedly knew about and tolerated, and then denied and tried to fire people who brought it up. You can look at a lot of different behavior he's been involved in to have some real concerns about that guy in particular, who happens to be a heartbeat away from being our governor. I also think it's just like really horrifying when you think about this guy who was arrested was 24 years old. I have yet to see a situation where somebody is this deep into creepy child porn stuff that wasn't abused as a child themselves, especially somebody at this age, which begs a lot of questions about what happened, how involved were his parents, who were apparently, like you said, depicted in some of these gross images. Yeah, that I don't think you get to this point without a whole mountain of horrifying, disgusting shit underneath it. So, I don't know. I mean, so for many years, I did not call myself a Christian, because even though I cared deeply about the Gospels and wanted to follow Jesus Christ and cared so much about that, I saw the way a lot of Christians behaved, and I didn't want to tar myself with that word. And since then, I've decided, no, screw that. I'm going to still say that I'm a Christian. It's them who are, not doing what the Beatitudes say. But I think that, again, just like Joe Hogg said, tarnishes the name of Democrats. I think that this kind of behavior coming from a church makes people wonder, we have the Catholic sex abuse scandal. We've got this. Is there something about Christianity that causes this? I think the answer is no. I think there's something about hierarchical organizations and institutions that causes this. And in our state and in our country, a lot of those are churches. So, but yeah, it really frustrates me as a Christian to have this kind of horror coming out from the people who are Bible thumping and trying to tell other people how to live their lives. Yeah, it just makes me sick. And I wish I had like a total hot take or a what to do about it. But I just think breaking down hierarchies, like democracy, transparency, accountability, use those three words in religion as well as in politics. And I think we help at least stop the worst of this problem moving forward.
Zach, I seem to recall, the last couple of years, conservatives like to use these buzzwords to describe folks like us over here on the left who, support, love, and empathize with LGBTQ youth, and they call us groomers. They say, we're turning the kids gay. boy, it certainly appears that this kind of behavior is groomed in high control religious environments, like the kind in which Beckwith is a high profile member now.
Yeah, certainly, Scott. And there are no words to describe what you have read, uh, not just in general humanity, but in terms of being in such a position and showing just fell disgrace for your fellow humanity and the people that you are there to serve. Um, and for LGBTQ plus people across the state in our rural gathering, we have heard stories of kids who have been kicked out of their homes by their parents after coming out. We have heard horrible, heinous hate crimes and speech. We have at universities hate speeches against LGBTQ youth, against Jews, against Muslims, against even Muslim or Palestinian members of student boards of government in the few places where there are those in the state of Indiana, and the suppression of those people coming into IU Bloomington or to other universities. But I will say also, as a Jew who, despite all of the horrible things that Netanyahu and what's going on in Gaza right now for all those poor people, I strongly believe in being a Jewish person and in the community in Congregation Beth Shalom in Bloomington, of which I am very happy to be a part of that community and interfaith with the church and other churches nearby us and the mosque in Bloomington. It is not a sin, as some Christians and the Christian nationalist agenda might believe, to come together with people of other faiths and believe in a stronger forward, particularly not Jews, Christians, and Muslims that many believe come from the same ancestry or basic precepts in one form or another. And so the idea that we would find this at all acceptable and entirely depressing to the overall uplifting and empathetic messaging that is so core to all three of those faiths is just not true. And I would happily whittle away for many hours on the oppression that Jews and Muslims have faced at the face of Christian nationalism. But I'll suffice to say that our community and Muslim communities in this state and the other Jewish communities in this state has had to navigate an increase in hatred and bigotry, and the intersection of LGBTQ plus Jews and Muslims have been particularly targeted and made to feel afraid. And our synagogue and other spaces have made it a priority to create those spaces of community for those individuals so that they can thrive and not feel oppressed by their very neighbors.
And I think that's the key to all of this, as Jesse was talking about, is to have a accountability within these communities, breaking down those rigid hierarchies. You've got to hope that if these accusations and allegations are proven true, that this kid will serve time and not be protected by the powerful folks that are in his circle. Let's go ahead and turn the corner, move on, zoom out, zoom away from Indiana, and look at our national and international stories, but still with an eye on things from an Indiana lens. And as such, I've sort of branded this segment anew as "Who cares?" Because this is happening over there. Why should an average Hoosier care about what's going on in Washington or Los Angeles or in Jerusalem or wherever? So let me say same as before, where we're going to look at some headlines before zooming in and taking a look at some of the quicker stories. So this week, for the first time in his presidency, Donald Trump imposed new sanctions on Russia, targeting two of Russia's largest oil companies and their subsidiaries. This comes days after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Washington to make the case for increased military aid, and Trump announced, then immediately canceled, another summit with Putin. Also this week, Vice President J.D. Vance was in the Holy Land visiting Israel amidst a shaky ceasefire. While he was there, he issued a rare rebuke of the Israeli government. The Knesset, their parliament, was essentially taking a vote on Thursday to annex the West Bank territories, which is, one of the few places where there's actually something resembling Palestinian local governance. Now, Vance described this as a political stunt and said it was an insult. And you will see me give Vice President J.D. Vance rare kudos on this occasion. So, jot that down in your book. Also this week, Japan elected their first female head of state, the conservative Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. Gives hopes to many Japanese women, but she is a very conservative individual, so rigid gender norms in Japan may not move much, even with a female head of state, with the new prime minister there. Also this week, New York Attorney General Letitia James pleaded not guilty to trumped-up mortgage fraud charges brought by Trump's weaponized DOJ against her. And on Saturday, the president said that he plans to hike tariffs on imports of Canadian goods by an extra 10% because of a TV ad aired by the province of Ontario, and Game 1 of the World Series in which the Toronto Blue Jays are participating. This ad uses words of former President Ronald Reagan to criticize U.S. tariffs. This angered Trump, who said he would end U.S.-Canada trade talks over the stunt. Real professional behavior there, my guy. Also, this week in New York, mayoral hopefuls Zoran Mamdani, Andrew Cuomo, and Republican Curtis Sliwa debated for the final time. Outgoing mayor, one-term Mayor Eric Adams, who has dropped out of the race, is not seeking re-election through his support behind Andrew Cuomo. Meanwhile, Democratic House Leader Hakeem Jeffries finally endorsed Democratic nominee Zoran Mamdani after months of holding out. And our final little headline in this section this week, the Department of Justice announced on Friday that it will monitor polls in 6 heavily Latino counties in New Jersey and California during upcoming elections on November 4th. So, gentlemen, before we dig into these other stories a little further, does anything in that section jump out at you, Jesse?
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the Zoran election, I think anybody paying attention to Jeffries, to Schumer, to the New York DNC leaders, to the national DNC leaders, I think we can put to rest forever this concept of vote blue no matter who, because it is very obvious at this point that that phrase only ever gets uttered when leftists are supposed to come behind a conservative Democrat, never the other way around. Doesn't matter how high of a position you have within the Democratic Party. Even Jeffries' endorsement is the weakest endorsement I've ever read. It's like, basically, I still suspect that he's going to be a danger to Jewish constituents, but he's promising me he's not, so I'm taking him at his word for now, and so I endorse the slate. You couldn't be weaker if you tried, and you couldn't release later in the game. I just think it just proves that there is no such thing as a Democratic coalition that actually will support whoever the voters choose. Which, note that, right? I think that will be important moving forward, because I think the results of the primaries in 26, I think we're going to see in some places a lot of socialists and progressives are going to win. And I think we're going to see the same behavior. But in places where a more conservative wins, I think we're going to see very weaponized, how dare you enable Trump by not immediately getting behind the Democratic nominee. We could see that with Bo Bai, for example. So I don't know. I just wanted to note that and have everybody remember this moment.
Jesse, I was going to ask, this is New York. Who cares? But you perfectly tied it back to Indiana and these very problems, this rift within the Democratic Party we're having here. Zach, anything jump out there to you?
I would first add to Jesse's point about the mayoral race in New York that, at least personally, as a Jew, I do not feel threatened by Adami talking about what is happening openly and transparently in Israel and in the Jewish world in America. And I do not think that he views it unfavorably. I think it's a matter of having not just the candid conversation, but bringing these communities stitched more closely together again in New York, of which there are many different communities of both in New York City and in New York as a state as a whole. And added on to that, there are presidential candidates in the last election cycle that came to Indiana on a tour at IU Bloomington, but there were only a couple of them that even mentioned the Middle East or Jewish people, despite the fact that IU has one of the largest, and at one point the largest IU undergraduate Jewish population in this country. So that's just all balderdash to me. And Akeem Jeffries, I will add, appears to be the ultimate status quo moderate uptick and has twiddled along since being elected. And many may remember the heartfelt speeches of why Hakeem Jeffries is their golden man of impeccable principles that will bring us forward and unite the different factions of the party. Show me the evidence that he is trying to unite the different factions of the Democratic Party.
He's Hillary Clinton, and he can quote Biggie. That's it. I just imagine Hill up there dropping bars. That's Hakeem Jeffries for you right there. Zach, let me ask about, since you brought up Jewish issues. Can I ask you about the advance in Israel and the kind of the tenuous ceasefire over there?
Yes. So obviously there was jubilation from many people, including one group that I'm just an average member of, the Jewish Democratic Council of America, that actually is responsible for helping elect many of the more progressive candidates and then office holders in Congress right now. We saw many of the hostages being returned. It is unfortunate that some of them likely will be found in body bags or mutilated, and the families just hope that they can be returned so that they can have proper burial and have some form of closure over the past year. And JD Vance and the tenuous hold from Trump of trying to make this big sweeping mandate about how Trump is saving the planet. We have seen in the Middle East many attempts at some ceasefires that at first appeared very successful. Not to say that this one might find a way of holding, but at the moment, Hamas and Israel, our IDF forces, are reneging on small sections of the deal and are awaiting deadlines that have been put out there in different forms from both sides. And the moment that expires a tenuous hold. I mean, one of the clinch points, to be specific for the audience, with the various tunnels that are being used by Hamas and on the October 7th attack, is something that they want all decimated and destroyed, and as a sour point that is causing the whole deal to fall apart before our eyes. And there are moments since Israel became a modern state where there are leaders from both sides who attempted to bring together this deal, only for extremists from both sides to silence them, some cases in very violent and direct fashion.
Yeah. Zach, why should the average Hoosier care about what's going on in the Middle East?
So the relationship between Israel and America a long time has been seen as very black and white, at least if you are just simply following the granular views of many Democrats and Republicans. But forces like AIPAC and others have been pushing it into the forefront of a ultimatum of, if they are on this side of this issue on Israel, then you cannot vote for them. And that has been pushed into the minds of many Hoosiers in races that are being broadcasted to them in other parts of the country. But for Hoosiers itself, we rely on Israel alliance for many things, not just with intelligence gathering, but with supposed values. And in Netanyahu, we have a despot who is using the war to cling on to power that is not too dissimilar to the despot that we have sitting in the Oval Office while tearing down the Great House. That is, as AOC put it at the Eugene Debs dinner, our house. So we see Netanyahu trying to take advantage of this, Trump trying to say that Netanyahu should be pardoned of all crimes and should be allowed to continue the great work in Israel, out of nowhere, supposedly, in the middle of a press conference announcing the peace deal. And Hoosiers should know that even if you are not Jewish, even if you are not Palestinian or Muslim, there are many Americans who reside and who work or travel to and from, and the further destabilization and with our shutdown is only going to further spiral our economy and make things more expensive in many different forms. What extent, only time will tell. If the unfortunate reality that has happened so many times of ceasefires again in the Middle East spirals into chaos once again. Hopefully it is not the case, but given the most recent trends, it seems that the inevitable of that is likely incoming soon.
Yeah, that's I don't know if this issue will ever go away in our lifetimes, if we'll ever see any lasting peace over there that is fair to everybody. My God, I hope so. I do want to move into some of our deeper stories here. So this week we are just completing week 4 of this government shutdown. And so, yeah, on Monday we hit day 20. The Senate failed for the 11th time to advance the House GOP's continuing resolution, still short of the 60 votes necessary to move forward. Again, Republicans hold majority in the House and the Senate. They do not have enough votes to overcome a Democratic filibuster. Although, they could just use a nuclear option. I'm surprised they aren't, but it suits them to keep this shutdown going. So that was Monday. They failed for the 11th time to advance, and also, the federal judiciary is beginning to run out of money, and furloughs began limiting operations of the judiciary for the first time in 30 years. Now, also on Monday, White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett said the shutdown likely ends this week. Newsflash, it did not. We're about to enter week 5. On Tuesday, Trump hosted Senate Republicans for a unity lunch at the Rose Garden, while House members remain sidelined. Again, the House is out of session. Mike Johnson's not bringing them back in, not swearing in Arizona Representative-elect Adelita Grijalva, because, she may be the vote necessary to release the Epstein files. So there's that whole thing going on, too. Wednesday, federal employee unions expanded a lawsuit challenging the shutdown firings implemented by OMB Director Russell Vought. On Thursday, a 12th continuing resolution failed in the Senate. Meanwhile, dueling pay the workers bills from both sides of the aisle failed. Republicans and Democrats each introducing their own bills to pay government workers during the shutdown. So essential workers at this time are still unpaid. By Friday, we're seeing that this is the first missed paycheck for a lot of these government workers, for the first full pay period. And we're seeing human costs already because of this. Food banks are seeing longer lines. The social safety net is already frayed. You've got government employees missing pay now. go into food banks. Well, government's shut down. A lot of the food banks rely on stuff from like the USDA. So you're going to find this vicious cycle potentially. But there are at least, some altruistic billionaires out there who want to make sure important people get paid, like the troops. New York Times reporting that billionaire Timothy Mellon is the donor behind a $130 million contribution to pay the troops during the shutdown. I should note that the amount required to pay military personnel for like one pay period is something like $15 billion. I do not know how this little dent is supposed to help. So that's the shutdown this week. Jesse, are your constituents there in Indianapolis on the Near East Side there beginning to feel effects of the shutdown? Who cares? Is this thing affecting average Hoosiers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is affecting average Hoosiers. It's very uneven on how it's affecting average Hoosiers right now, and I think that's somewhat intentional. I think that even starting back earlier this year with Doge, you can look at the fact that in the federal government, people of color are way overrepresented compared to the private sector, right? And so it's a lot of career public servants who, have been getting a smaller paycheck than their peers in the private sector, but have been serving the public because they actually care and they give a shit about this country and want it to work well, who are now facing the brunt of this, just as they did earlier with Doge. And so, I have had some constituents who they themselves or their family members were laid off and don't know, they have strong suspicions that they might never come back, right? That Trump's going to use this as an excuse to make further cuts or extend the furloughs. And again, it's a lot of middle-aged and older Black and Latino people who, when you look at, Department of Homeland Security posting Nazi memes on Facebook every day, it becomes pretty clear what the objective is here. So, yeah, we haven't yet started seeing people actively feeling the food cuts, but I've got people freaking out and understanding that if the food bank runs short, if SNAP benefits get cut, their families are screwed. That means hungry children, and so that's becoming more real as it gets closer to when that would happen. And, it's kind of an extension of what a ton of my constituents have been feeling for months and months, which is just shock and horror and just waiting for someone to do something. I fielded, I want to say 5 different emails in the last 2 weeks from just regular average Joe constituents saying, what do we do? How do we resist when, not if, the federal government sends the National Guard in to occupy Indianapolis? What do we do when, not if? It's just like the things that even 3 months ago felt like conspiracy theories are now regular, reasonable people are like, well, this is clearly going to happen. So what's the plan? How are we going to react to it? I can't overestimate or emphasize how worried people are and how upset people are. You saw some little glimmer at the No Kings last week, but there were a ton of people who felt that way and just also saw showing up at a rally doesn't fix it in and of itself, but they agreed very strongly with the need to resist.
Zach, it's funny. Well, Jesse's mentioning these, ICE raids. How do you resist that? Or like federal takeover in Indianapolis. They still seem to have money for that shit, don't they? The ICE raids in Chicago and Portland are ongoing. I mean, that didn't shut down during this government shutdown. Doesn't this whole thing prove that it's all just kind of a farce?
The whole thing is a farce. And as Jesse put, is it going to be used as an excuse to furlough a lot of career public servants? I will also add that there are people in the Rural Summit cohort that have been laid off that recently or not so recently were federal workers working remotely. And I'm sure that's another target that will be struck. And many Hoosiers that work for the federal government from their homes across Indiana will be one of the first to go. It was one of the things that was on the chopping block for Doge cuts of getting rid of a bunch of employees that worked remotely from across our great nation. And I would add to we're in cluster F that we are dealing with this, that there is ICE raids that are coming and rumors for in our community, in our great Hoosier state. Indiana University, there are text chains, I won't name specifically or names for many of them fear of their own safety at this point, or international graduate coalition students that are afraid of being caught on camera for fear of retribution from the state or from the current leadership at IU, particularly Pamela Whidden. There have been moments where ICE has come in to Bloomington, raiding dormitories. And the first one was near the start of this semester. And there is no indication of who or what they were looking for. And the sightings in Portland and Chicago, unfortunately, it could very well be the case that we could be next on that chopping block. Another key note in the Eugene Debs situation that Bernie Sanders articulated so beautifully is that we see often people not reacting to the situation because it doesn't directly impact them. And then by the time it gets to them, there's nobody left to stand with them. So Hoosiers should be very concerned about these ICE raids and the fact that they have already, in a couple of cases, and in a couple of cases, rumored to be coming to parts of our Hoosier state, not the least of which is also ICE agents going into public schools without the consent of administrators, in a couple of cases without warning. And Governor Pritzker of Illinois, I know, has been working hard with the public schools as well as community leaders to ensure that the proper safety measures are in place for this horrible new reality that many of these towns and cities are facing.
It really, the whole thing all goes to show, like we're talking about these ICE raids and stuff. They're going on at the same time the government's shut down. It's pick and choose. This is the Trump government that folks voted for. It's essentially, ruling by fiat. It's decree. It's, well, we can find the money for the things that we value, but not for the things that we don't value, not for the things that actually help people in their average lives. It's a dismantling of the government, and you have to wonder if Democrats can negotiate with them to open this thing back up, because the Trump regime's just been impounding money that Congress has set aside for certain projects. So if they come to an agreement, they say, all right, we're going to open up the government at these levels, and then the executive branch doesn't spend that, what have we even done? It is dismantling of the federal government in real time. We're seeing it, and in many ways, the next story gives kind of a tangible, visible representation of what's happening, in a stark way for people to see visually. So demolition began this week on the East Wing of the White House to make room for a massive ballroom addition planned by President Donald Trump. This guy is spending his waning years really, really trying to convince people that he doesn't have little balls. He's got the biggest balls of them all. But this project, originally announced as a 90,000-foot privately funded ballroom that was supposed to cost between $250 and $250 million, is now being cited at closer to $300 million, and will be built where the East Wing stood. It is gone. Debris is being hauled away with visible routing through the DC streets and to recycling and scrap yards. Now, Trump had previously claimed that this ballroom addition wouldn't interfere with the existing building, and yet, as we can see from photos, the East Wing building is fully gone. Historic preservation groups and watchdogs say the project.
How could that be?
That guy, really? No. But yeah, so these preservation groups, say the project it's bypassing regular reviews. The National Capital Planning Commission and the Commission on Fine Arts had nothing to do with this. And they also complain that the scale of the new structure may overwhelm the historic house. Additionally, there are questions about the funding of this thing. Corporations and donors contributing large sums. Open this thing up to being a boondoggle of corruption. Again, Trump administration? No, never. They would never. But also, there's just the symbolic loss. The East Wing traditionally housed the First Lady's offices and a lot of social and cultural work, and its removal is being seen by some of those folks as eroding the part of the institutional heritage. Now, listen, guys, I saw a lot of what I would, call normie libs on social media this week, like tearfully ruining the demolition of this structure. What do you guys think about the ballroom, the East Wing, just the demolition in general? I have maybe non-traditional thoughts, which I'll hold on to for a second, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. Zach, I'll get you first on this one.
I will say first, as a undergraduate history major at IU Bloomington, it is a great loss to all the people of this country. And on a personal note, having never gone to the White House, and I guess many others, they will never see that part of our history. And we see the stories about this going to be about Trump having the biggest whatever, wahoos, whatever you want to call it. And there is much speculation that actually this is his retirement bunker. And people speculating at the early tell signs of how Trump believes he will never actually leave office. And despite the fact that, there's already an emergency bunker for the president of the United States should such extreme measure ever be needed. And this is a very flashy proposal that I'm sure that when the richest people in this country and in this world stood around him, the Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos of the world, Mark Zuckerberg even showing up and totally spoon feeding, and they're salivating at every switch and turn. And this is just the latest stunt, and corporate donors lining it up to, I'm sure, be most likely a private venue for those rich mother effers to come in and get more stuff from Trump. Perhaps ask for another tax break after they already got one for the trillionaires.
Jesse, do you get a little misty seeing part of the White House be torn down?
I'm much more of a Thomas Paine kind of view of the American presidency, where I think that we got way too close to kingship even back in George Washington's days. And, I really don't like the pomp and circumstance of the White House. And I get it, but it feels very 1700s to me. And I think that a more modern United States, we shouldn't be as wrapped up in this history. Keep it as a museum or whatever. But I just think as a residence, it's a little bizarre. But I don't think any of that gets away from the fact that this is dictatorship. This is just one person doing what they want and treating the government like it belongs to them, not like they are a public servant who is occupying the halls for a few years, steering the ship. It's not your ship, right? So I think people have a view of like North Korean style totalitarian, fearless leader dictatorship, as opposed to what real dictatorship has looked like for most of human history, which is, even like Roman emperors, they still had a Senate. It's just that the Senate didn't matter, right? Like you got some little wiggle room, but you could never go directly against the emperor for a while, right? Same in like Russia, right? Like Putin is going to get his way no matter what the votes in, the parliament say. And we're starting to see that more and more blatantly with Trump. And choosing to do that during a government shutdown, I think is an intentional like thumbing the nose at us. It's just showing like, oh yeah, that government thing, the public thing, that exists if I let it exist. I'm going to be doing what I want, regardless of what Congress or the judiciary system thinks. And that's dangerous. Like, I don't know how else to say it. I know our next couple things in Latin America, we're going to talk about that again. But even if I like hated the White House and wanted the whole thing torn down, I would want it to be done collectively. And because, our government as a whole decided what was right, hopefully with some sort of plebiscite or let people weigh in, not just because one dude with, by the way, a horrible tacky taste that's even more anti-working people than the old White House. Like, you should not be individually, unilaterally redesigning public structures. Like, that just
interior
seems so
designed by Trinidad James, gold earthing. Yeah. Listen, I got to tell you, seeing this thing this week and seeing a lot of, I think, liberal reactions to it, I'm kind of like, okay, all right, is this going to be the thing that really brings it home that this structure, the system, this government that has held everything up in this country for the last 250 years, it's gone. It's done. It is gone. It is not coming back. It is like the East Wing of the White House. It has been thoroughly destroyed. You cannot put it back together. Hopefully we can build something new, substantive and real, that isn't a 90,000 foot square gaudy ballroom, but a real new system that works for everybody. And I don't know, man, like, shed those tears, but I like take it in, realize that it's over. Like, I hope symbolically that this is the thing that really radicalizes people, that we've got. There's no rebuilding, there is building anew. And in many ways, that sort of speaks to this divide that we've this progressive versus conservative Democrat vibe, almost, really, that we've spoken to at several points throughout this thing. Trump, White House, these people are not conservatives. They are fascists. They are reactionaries. The normie libs that I speak about, the folks that are ruining the demolition of our institutions, the folks who wanted to conserve those institutions, weep at their loss, and the progressives want to, build something new in its place. So I've got another story here this week that sort of speaks to this duality within the Democratic Party of the progressive wing versus the more conservative wing. And we're going to go out to Maine, another largely white rural state, even more white and rural than Indiana, where Senate candidate Graham Plattner has run into a bit of a controversy the last couple weeks. So during an appearance of Monday's episode of liberal podcast Pod Save America, the Maine Senate hopeful sought to get out ahead of opposition research, showing him dancing shirtless with a skull and crossbones tattoo on his chest that eerily resembles a symbol used by the Nazi SS. The 41-year-old military veteran and oyster farmer expressed regret over the tattoo and announced plans to have it removed. This coming after a week of damning headlines over resurfaced social media posts. Plattner was a big fan of Reddit there for a while, posted a lot of stuff. He apologized last week for a series of offensive posts where he said, which he said came during a period of his life when he was disillusioned. He had recently got out of the military. He felt disconnected from his community. Those include a 2013 post downplaying sexual assault in the military and a since deleted 2018 post suggesting violence is necessary to enact social change. In a video last week, Plattner said he regretted these comments and said they did not reflect the life he has now built. It was not until I started hearing from reporters and DC insiders that I realized this tattoo resembled a Nazi symbol, Plattner said in a statement to Politico on Tuesday. I absolutely would not have gone through life having this on my chest if I knew that, and to insinuate that I did is disgusting. I am already planning to get this removed, and by later this week, he had it covered up with a different symbol. In the Washington Post, Plattner said he was made aware several weeks ago that his opponents were saying he had a white supremacist tattoo, but did not know the tattoo's connotations until a few days ago when one of his staffers showed him the image of the Nazi symbol. Quote, I've seen symbols very like this throughout the years, but always in the U.S. military context. That's essentially how I always thought about it, end quote. Plattner suggested Washington Democrats are attempting to tarnish his run, which has energized some liberals in the state to see, who see his Democratic opponent, Governor Janet Mills, as the insider pick. Mills, a two-term governor who announced her candidacy last week, was a top recruit of Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. So I should note, yes, there is this contested primary out there in Maine. Plattner is the progressive darling, and Mills, the outgoing two-term governor, is the more centrist approach. Now, Mills is Plattner's primary opponent. Plattner is Mills' secondary opponent. After Father Time, Mills is like 79 years old and should not be running for Senate at this point. That said, you want to make sure you got your guy right. Now, maybe the 79-year-old isn't the right person to run up against Plattner if he is problematic. Maybe it's somebody else. So I want to ask you guys, is this problematic? Jesse, what do you think? Is this much ado about nothing? Is this blown out of proportion, or are we like wary about these guys who look like progressive darlings at first, and then maybe they turn into John Fetterman?
Right. Yeah, the Fetterman effect is scary, I think so. Old social media posts, I just cannot understand how anyone could give a shit about that in this time and age. Especially when 1 week ago, the president of the United States posted an AI video of him literally dumping human shit on his political opponents, intentionally, and blasted it from his comms. Who cares what somebody said on social media 10 years ago? It could be the most horrible thing. If it seems like you have moved on from that and that you've put that piece behind you, I couldn't imagine a thing I care less about. That doesn't mean I agree with his words. I think a lot of what he said was horrible and would not vote for a person espousing those views today. But I think human beings can and should change. But if you're going to worry about the guy's past, I would say the fact that he enlisted in Blackwater in 2018 is 10,000 times more damning than anything you could write on social media. I personally, from what I've seen of the guy, think that he has changed and wants to move in a different direction. And what he says about right now makes sense. The thing that bothers me the most about this is old social media posts. That just proves you're a human being. To me, that's authenticity. But I call bullshit on him not knowing ever. I don't think that he got the tattoo because it was a Nazi thing. I think what he said was true. He was drunk. It was in Croatia. He got it with a buddy. He thought it was a military thing. But I don't believe that for 18 years he believed it was just a military thing. And nobody was ever hey, do you not watch World War II documentaries? That's the Totenkopf, bud. I just don't what I think probably happened is he was that's a period of my life I don't like to think about. I don't even want my brain to go there. I don't think he kept it as because he's a secret Nazi. But I think it reads as a lie, his story about how he heard about it and what he's doing about it now. And I really don't like that inauthenticity. I think that he could have just been yeah, you know what? That is fucked up. I should have gotten rid of it long ago. It honestly was painful for me to look at and think, I don't know what the truth is, but I just don't think it's what he said. And I don't like politicians lying about things that they consider a liability. So that's the biggest problem I have. I still think he's by far the strongest candidate I've seen in that area of Maine. I don't live there, so maybe there's other great people below the surface. I'd vote for him, quite frankly, based on this, but would tell him in no uncertain terms. I think that the way he responded to this crisis was very wrong.
Yeah, Zach, listen, I've known several people who have served our country in uniform, and almost to a T, all of them by age 25 have three things: a Dodge muscle car, Challenger or Charger, it doesn't matter, either one, a divorce, and a questionable tattoo. Do you believe that he didn't know this thing had Nazi symbolism? I mean, it's a skull and crossbones, right? You go into the tattoo shop. Hey man, give me the cool skull and crossbones. There's different flavors of skull and crossbones, right? I mean, you could be a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan or a East Carolina Pirates fan. But also there is a lot of history of bad Nazi symbolism kind of working its way into the U.S. military, regardless of whether they acknowledge kind of where those symbols came from. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he knew? Do you trust that he didn't know what it was then, that he, still didn't know until recently? What do you think?
I will first encapsulate that I am only aware of this story as a story put in front of me. I'm not familiar with Plattner or the particular dynamics in this race in Maine, but obviously it is a very personal issue for myself and many of people in my community and friends, not just those who are Jewish, but those who share similar values to myself. And I agree with just that the handling of this situation as described is terrible, and it shows a disregard and lack of respect for some of the very people you are asking to vote for you and represent you in such an office. And because of the John Fetterman effect, I think that it is incumbent upon those voters to take a more holistic view of not just Plattner's current stance, but his entire history. If he says he's fully moved on, sure, but you need a full accounting. And in this day and age, it is often not too far away that in your state you're going to see headlines that showcase exactly the history of someone who is going to be assuming such an office. So I would say open mind. Would I vote for Plattner as described with the situation? Probably not, without more information and a clearer picture of where he stands on a whole host of other issues. I just feel the tattoo specifically, imprinting it on your own skin, and for that long a period, as Jesse said, not being aware of it, I also call bullshit. I have seen many versions of this. I unfortunately also grew up in even in Bloomington, with a community of some of my peers joking to me about the Holocaust never happened, or nice Jewish schnauzer there, or what have you. And it is just the tip of the iceberg, not to gain sympathy, but that it is part of a larger conversation, and that there were many others who I knew growing up who faced much worse, unfortunately, particularly those Jews who are people of color. Because, as is the case in much of American history, those who identify in multiple minority groups get twice the pummeling.
Yeah. I'll say this about Plattner. If this controversy shows us anything, is that we shouldn't fall in love with any politician. We're all messy people, and even politicians, especially politicians, oftentimes. And it's a vote is a transaction. It is electing somebody is a transaction. It is a compact we enter into the people. We think they're going to do more good for us than they are bad, or more good than their potential opponent would. So with all these folks, with Plattner, somebody who I was really excited about until a couple weeks, it says all the right things, like Fetterman. Before he won his election, saying all the right things. You go back to Obama in 2008, man. We all fell in love with Obama and thought he was going to deliver us into utopia, and we, just got more of the same with some tweaks around the edges. So I guess with all these folks, we have to they're people. We have to remember they're all people, and we should treat these things as a transaction. It is a business arrangement we have with our elected officials. It is not a marriage, right? We should not become too personally invested in any of them, except for Jesse. I'm personally invested. Let's move on. So Latin America this week, the Trump administration keeps turning up the temperature. Now, Colombia has condemned U.S. airstrikes on vessels allegedly involved in drug smuggling off the coast of South America, urging Washington to immediately halt further attacks in the Pacific and the Caribbean. Now, this plea came after Pete Hegseth, the self-styled Secretary of War, announced 2 new strikes on Wednesday, which were the first to hit the Pacific and have left at least 5 people dead. According to U.S. figures, at least 9 attacks have now been carried out since early September, killing 37 people. A broad range of experts have said the campaign is illegal. I myself, not an expert, will share that sentiment. So now Colombia calls on the U.S. government to cease these attacks and urges it to respect the norms dictated by international law. The foreign ministry said in a statement on Wednesday evening, the president, Gustavo Petro, was more blunt, writing on social media, quote, "It is murder. Whether in the Caribbean or the Pacific, the U.S. government strategy breaks the norms of international law," end quote. Point Petro, that is true. Now, Washington initially said the campaign, which launched on the 2nd of September, was aimed at destroying cartels operating out of Venezuela. President Trump justified the attacks by claiming the U.S. was in an armed conflict with narco traffickers, while Nicolas Maduro accused him of seeking regime change. The attacks have been accompanied by a major U.S. military buildup in the Caribbean, now involving missile destroyers, F-35 fighter jets, a nuclear submarine, and about 6,500 troops. The decision to extend operations into the Pacific and the targeting of Colombian vessels has further deepened tensions in the region and raised fears over what the U.S. administration might do next. So, Jesse, we've talked about this. We've been keeping an eye on this. The buildup around Venezuela, the strikes on Venezuelan ships. Now we're getting the Colombians involved. Not great. Are you concerned that we're stoking a large regional war?
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely are, whether we want to be concerned about it or not. And, I think that the only real defense of this or argument for it I've seen from conservatives have been like, oh, well, Obama used drone strikes on people. And I was like, yeah, and I hated that too. That was also terrible and inappropriate. That was also in the context of a massive war that we were engaged in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're not at war here. And to your point, we're already sharing information with Colombia to try to take down narco traffickers.
This is an ally. This is an ally, yes.
Yeah, right. The way you take down criminal organizations is not just murder a bunch of people who might possibly be in those criminal organizations. Again, stop clock right twice a day. Rand Paul, I think, has come out with some really good points about this. And I always try to ask conservatives to think about this. What if Hillary Clinton was president and was just bombing and killing people and claiming afterwards they were terrorists and providing no evidence? How would you feel about that? Oh, would you realize then that that's dictatorially and totally against the Constitution and a threat to you and your liberties? Yes. Well, that's why lefties are the ones who are raising the red flag about this. Due process protects everybody. That's true for ICE. That's true for these, even if you are. My dad died of a fentanyl overdose. First off, no fentanyl is coming from Venezuela. But even if the boat carrying the lethal dose for my own father was in the Caribbean, I would not want those people just murdered by a strike without coming to trial, right? Because you could be wrong. The United States government is not always correct about who they're accusing of different things. And even if you are correct, capture them, figure out, what their sources are, how the whole network works. Don't just I watched The Wire. In The Wire, they didn't just come in with machine guns and gun down street level dealers, because that's not how you actually stop the network, right? That's not how you actually stop the distribution. So yeah, everything about this is wrong. It's scary. It's one part distraction, one part ramp up militarism, one part inducement of fear. I don't even really know what's going on, but I hate it no matter what. So
yeah, Zach, there's an Indiana angle this week. So Senator Todd Young said in an exclusive to Axios that Congress isn't hearing enough in any form, including a public forum. Young said the legal ramifications of military actions need to be discussed with lawmakers, and if there's been any takeaway from the last roughly 25 years of congressional action and inaction, it's not that Congress needs to be more hands-off, that Congress needs to get out of the way. I think Congress needs to go further. Rather than just asserting our ability to authorize military force, which we certainly need to do, we also need to officially bring to close these conflicts and make clear that we have constitutional prerogatives that need to be consistently asserted. Now, Zach, let me ask you, number one, do you agree with Young's analysis? Number two, do you believe Young agrees with his own analysis?
No and no. I would first say that Todd Young has long been blowing into the wind of partisan hackery of what will help promote him politically. And that is always taken in any statement that I ever hear uttered from his mouth. But to the issue, Congress is supposed to be not just authorizing force, but it's supposed to have oversight. And many people, even if you are not intricately familiar with the norms of intelligence in relation between Congress and the White House and intelligence networks, will be familiar with the term of the Gang of Eight. That is supposed to be the bastions of the people in Congress that are the highest level of security, that are supposed to have oversight and be in direct control of furthering of funding for said things, even on approved projects that have already started, let alone going in and maiming and killing people in the name of, as Jesse said, it may or may not be responsible, and not bringing them to trial and due process, which, like with the ICE agents, is happening all over the place. And again, as Jesse put it, the shoe were on the other foot, and Hillary Clinton, or heaven forbid, Obama in certain cases, in which case, yes, there were some Democrats who did step forward with some of his foreign policy campaigns in the Middle East in particular, which he still defends to this day as the more just way with the least amount of harm done. I don't think anyone is buying that in the legacy chapter of his life.
It opened up this can of worms, right? And that's the whole, not the whole thing, but I think a big part of folks out here on the left, maybe our disappointment with Obama, is that he kept doing those things. He didn't. If he had made sure that George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were handed over to the International Criminal Court on January 21st, 2009, we wouldn't be in the situation we are today. It's failure to hold our own elite criminals accountable has led us to a situation where we have the biggest elite criminal potentially ever presiding over the destruction of the Republic. Final story, and not exactly a lighter note. I promise that this sort of all ties in together, but we're going to close on sports. So this week, the federal authorities announced indictments against some 30-plus individuals linked to two major schemes. One, an illegal sports betting scheme using insider information and and the other, a high-stakes rigged poker games run by organized crimes. These are two separate schemes, which it involved, folks in major NBA circles. So, including active player Terry Rozier, a guard for the Miami Heat, was charged in the sports betting scheme, accused of providing non-public information about games, injuries, who's going to play, who's out, who's got something twisted this night, so bettors can bet the under on how many points that player is going to score. Little things like that. Prop bets, not fixing games, but in our world of legalized sports gambling, potentially a lot of money to be made. Also involved was former player and assistant coach Damon Jones. This is a guy who bounced around the league a lot, sort of a hanger-on in LeBron James circles. Used his position as an assistant coach with the Lakers to inform bettors when maybe LeBron wasn't going to be playing that night, and they would give kickbacks back to him. Also tied up in this scheme is the actual current, well, not now, was the actual current head coach of the Portland Trail Blazers, Chauncey Billups, a Hall of Fame player in his own right in his day. He was charged in his role in these poker games, which are tied to mafia families and money laundering and wire fraud. And Billups has not been officially named in conjunction with the insider information scheme, but is sort of implicated tangentially. There is a person fitting his description named in that, but he has not been tied to that scheme yet. So listen, what happens is, these schemes include allegations that players and co-contributors shared this private injury information, sat out games, or manipulated prop bets. The poker ring, they allegedly used high-tech cheating methods like x-ray tables and marked cards and rigged shufflers. I did not even know these things existed, to defraud participants. Now, the NBA did respond. Billups and Rozier were placed on leave. Commissioner Adam Silver said he was deeply disturbed and stressed the integrity of the game is paramount. But there are potential, ripple effects long down the line here, with experts warning that there's billions of dollars in potential litigation here, and broad fallout for sports betting regulation in particular. I mean, we're going to have folks questioning whether these games are on the up and up, whether the league is rigged. So since the legalization of sports betting in many states, this scandal highlights how vulnerable the system is when these players and props and the injuries and the inside information mix. For the NBA and, all sports in general, but this is not the first time this thing has popped up, in basketball. Their credibility is on the line, and if fans and bettors believe the games can be manipulated, the entire foundation of professional sports in this country is shaken. So this opens the door for, major regulatory questions and federal oversight. So, Zach, you're a young man. I assume you are bombarded with ads for sports gambling. The effects on young men, your generation, and sports gambling, and now you're seeing that the leagues and the players themselves are getting caught up in this. I'm a liberty guy. I'm a legalize things guy and then regulate. Did we let the cat out of the bag with this much unregulated gambling in this country?
Certainly, it is a critical issue that is often overlooked as a money grab or the supposed elusive American dream that by winning the lottery or by engaging in this, that you're somehow going to change things for everyone. And we have seen the bad ripple after effects of that is caused. In Indiana, we see a supermajority that has put in many forwarding laws and regulations to make it easier and easier for young people, and particularly, as you say, Scott, targeting young men in Indiana to engage in sports gambling, and that it's a matter of making it a more full experience for everyone, or making it easier to place your bet is the be-all, when in fact it makes it easier for you to click one button and to almost sell a piece of your soul to engage in this cycle, and to bring it hyper local again to IU with basketball. We have seen past players, not specifically with gambling, but caught up in scandals of getting pulled over by the police or a DUI, and quietly them try to cover it up and keep the players on this team. So I am heartened to see the suspensions of said players and the integrity. But as Scott said, is the cat already out of the bag? Yes. Is it getting to the point where, like so many of these other issues, it is spilling out to the public to the point where it's hard to be ignored? Yes, because these ads are everywhere. The amount of people who engage in these sports gambling in Indiana are everywhere. People can enjoy it. But I frankly, personally, do not see it as a good addition to our economy, and in fact makes people often more or worse off, just as the local lotteries in our state do.
Yeah. So what, Jesse? Are we prohibitionists now?
Yeah, I was just talking about this with my wife over breakfast before the show, and she came out with her hot take: ban all gambling because of all the negative impacts it has on people. I was like, well, how would you enforce that? And what about alcohol? That's also got negative impacts. And she was like, all right, fine, you talked me into it. Ban all alcohol as well. That's not my take. But I do think that when we have this much money, right? Like if you have a legalized industry that has this much money going through it, the risks, the temptations that these NBA players and coaches are dealing with are the same as what we see in big corporations, right? And there is corruption and self-dealing that will follow every single time, which is why we need regulations for industries like this. And I think personally, when it's like quote unquote sin industries, if you're talking about alcohol, tobacco, guns, gambling, there need to be heavier regulations because they could have very obvious negative impacts on people's lives beyond just self-enrichment, right? And corrupting the game. So, I'm not opposed. I don't gamble. I think it's bad. You probably shouldn't. But I will occasionally drink, even though I think that's probably bad and realistically you really shouldn't either. So I'm not here to judge other people, but I think that the predatory nature of the advertising, I think that the ubiquitousness of gambling in our society, especially for young men, and I think that the way we are just allowing people to make money hand over fist, well beyond what regulators can catch up with. This is just the predictable outcome that we see, right? So if we want these things in our society, and I think there might be a place for them, I think we just need to have it structured, have regulations, and have clear penalties that are consistently applied when people violate those, so that if you're thinking rationally, the best solution isn't cheat a little bit and see how rich you can get before you get caught, right?
I'm gonna sort of ask myself the last question here, right? Who cares, right? It's just sports. Well, yes, and it kind of shows the nature of business and corruption, and really it's like the American scofflaw gangster ethos that we have here. Listen, like TV, media, we see media falling apart and the consolidation there. Live sports, things like the NBA, are the only thing holding up a lot of media. And if people lose faith in that, what's holding up a lot of the structures that, and again, maybe we want sort of the large media conglomerates that are held up by professional sports to fall and fracture that market and get us, back to some place where the monopolies are broken up. But it really just, I think this whole thing kind of goes to show that the American capitalist system is just like, I don't know, a bunch of corruption and Ponzi schemes and stuff wrapped up in nice, slick marketing and packaging, and in a way, stuff like this is kind of like the White House, being torn down. You're seeing the structures fall away that gave a meaning and myth to an otherwise complicated story at the very best. Listen, that's going to wrap us up for this week here. I want to make sure both of you guys get a chance to say goodbye and tell the folks where they can find you. Zach, how about you? Where can the good folks find you or find out more about the organizations you work with?
Yeah, I will just very briefly say that, turning back around to redistricting for one brief second, when Tucker Carlson and Mike Braun were there, I was in the room with IU Democrats and Matt Pierce and Shelley Yoder, my two representatives in the State House. And if and when this redistricting call with a special session, we want you to join us, Indiana Rural Summit, Mad Voters, and others at the State House, come together and do what we need to. And as Shelley Yoder put it, you may think that your shouts into the void to your representative at the State House is going nowhere, but she is here to tell us, and I'm telling you, that they are listening, and that some of the Senate Republicans are starting to crumble under the weight of constituents speaking up. So speak up. You can find the Indiana Rural Summit at indianaruralsummit.org. We are on Facebook as Indiana Rural Summit. We are working on TikTok at Indiana Rural Summit. And we look forward to any other groups you are with. Organizing Indiana, co-founded by Michelle and her husband Simon Higgs, that brings together many of these other groups like Mad Voters, like ICP Indiana, Coalition of Public Educators, and others that have been fighting the good fight on particular issues on your behalf for many years.
Very good. Thank you, Zach. Jesse, take us home, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always an honor to be on the show. Yeah, if people want to hear more from me, why? Just kidding. Look at www.jesseforindy.com. That's where you can sign up for my email newsletter. I'm very proud to say that I'm pretty positive I put out more content about Indianapolis politics than like the mainstream media and all the other politicians in town combined. You never are short of my opinion on a bunch of things, whether you agree or disagree. I would love to hear your feedback on it. And so sign up for my weekly-ish constituent emails. I also post them on my website, but the formatting sucks and it looks bad, so just sign up. Yeah, follow me on different social media. I also try to have a loud voice there. I am here to represent my district, but then I also am trying to push for politics to move left in this state. So, all those amazing groups that Zach just mentioned, absolutely follow them. I want to consider myself an ally to all of those, and then also bring a democratic socialist perspective. So if you love Zoran Mamdani, if you love Bernie Sanders, hit me up, follow Central Indiana DSA, or we've got chapters all over the state. If we don't have a chapter in your area, you could help fix that, and I would help you help that. So definitely get involved. As Zach was saying, right now, there's like a split where some of our legislators are super cynical and think that we're stupid and think that they can get away with murder and there's nothing we can do. They're the Donald Trump style, I could shoot somebody in Times Square and get away with it, or Fifth Avenue. We know that a lot and growing number of representatives are actually very afraid of us, and they are afraid of people waking up and getting involved in politics. And that's the whole reason for the redistricting. They're trying to suppress any chance that people have of being able to push back and kind of overthrow the corrupt government we have electorally. So let's make them choke on it. Let's absolutely get involved. Let's rally people to vote. Let's get great candidates all across the state. And I think we're going to do it. Zach's going to help. I'm going to help. Scott's going to help. We're here for you, man.
All right. Thanks, Jesse. And I will remind folks one more time to make sure they are following Project Next. Again, like and subscribe on the YouTube channel, hit the bell. Follow us on social media at Project Next Movement on most of your sites. And then also follow me at HoosLeft. So for my guest today, Zach Harrison and Jesse Brown, I am Scott Aaron Rogers. I will see you next Sunday. But until then, that's all for Who's Left this week. Love each other, Indiana.